Imagine for a second that you wake up tomorrow morning and you have completely lost your vocabulary.
Oh, wow. That is a terrifying thought.
Right, like all the nuance, all the complex caveats, the poetic metaphors you use to describe your feelings or, your plans for the future, all of it is just gone.
So you're left with basically nothing.
Exactly. You are left with only the absolute bare minimum, the ability to state concrete facts about the current moment. Like you can point to a clock and you can state a basic action. I wake up, I eat.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a nightmare for most of us.
It really would. But it is exactly where every single person starts when they set out to learn a new language. Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
So if you're a returning listener, you know the drill. We take a stack of sources, we filter out the noise, and extract the absolute most important insights to help you stay well-informed.
And today's source material is, well, it might seem a little surprising at first glance.
Yeah, we are looking at a foundational A1 beginner-level English language textbook, specifically a lesson focused entirely on numbers, telling time, and daily routines.
Which is a fascinating stack of sources, precisely because it strips everything back to the studs.
Right, you really have to go back to the basics.
Because when you're a fluent speaker, you take your language for granted. You don't think about the immense cognitive machinery required to simply tell someone what you had for breakfast.
Oh, absolutely. It's totally automatic for us.
But analyzing these beginner language materials reveals a tremendous amount, not just about how the human brain acquires new information, but about human habits themselves. We're really looking at how simple numbers and the simple present tense act as the ultimate building blocks for human communication.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can talk about what we do in a day, we have to establish when we do it.
Exactly. The timeline comes first.
Right. If you look at your own morning routine, it is entirely dictated by the clock. So our source material tackles this right out of the gate by introducing basic numbers.
But it does it in a very specific way, doesn't it?
It does. First, it walks the learner through 1 through 10, which, makes perfect sense. But then it deliberately adds 11 and 12 specifically for the purpose of telling time.
Right, because if you stop at 10, I mean, you have the basis for a decimal system. You can count currency, you can measure quantities.
Sure.
But without those two extra numbers, 11 and 12, the entire system of tracking your daily life just falls apart.
It's practically useless.
Yeah. The curriculum is prioritizing functional survival over pure mathematical logic.
And to make it functional, the lesson introduces the phrase "a clock." So the learner is taught to explicitly say, "It is 3 o'clock," or "It is 8 o'clock."
It's giving them the exact formula.
Yeah, and it doesn't just stick to the top of the hour either. It introduces the concept of the half hour using the word 30.
Which is a pretty big jump for a beginner.
It is. The text uses the specific example of 6:30, and it actually takes the time to explicitly explain to the learner that this means 6.5 30 minutes.
Which is a brilliant pedagogical choice. They are taking this highly abstract mathematical number 30 and forcing the learner to connect it to the physical, spatial concept of half of an hour on a clock face.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it grounds the vocabulary. When you're teaching an adult a new language, you have to attach new abstract sounds to pre-existing concrete concepts in their brain.
And speaking of concrete concepts, we get to the crucial distinction between AM and PM.
Right, the classic split.
Yeah, the text uses 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. as its contrasting examples. 8 a.m. is 8 in the morning and 8 p.m. is 8 in the evening. But looking at this, I really have to question the method here.
Why is that?
Well, learning numbers is essentially like learning the source code of a language. It's pure data. So why does this lesson stop at 12?
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
Right, because in so many parts of the world, especially in Europe and across various professional fields, a 24-hour clock is the absolute standard. Why not just teach the 24-hour clock right away to the beginner and avoid the whole AM and PM distinction entirely? It feels like they're teaching an extra step.
What's fascinating here is the concept of cognitive load for a beginner.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, you have to put yourself in the shoes of an A1 learner. At that stage, every single new phonetic sound requires massive mental effort to decode, process, and memorize.
Like trying to read code you've never seen before.
Exactly. If you introduce a 24-hour clock right out of the gate, you are forcing the learner to memorize 24 unique phonetic sequences and map them to a timeline immediately. By stopping at 12, the textbook cuts that cognitive load exactly in half.
Oh, wow. So it's literally just about sparing the brain from overheating. 12 numbers are just mathematically easier to juggle than 24.
Precisely. But it goes deeper than just the math. The 12-hour AM and PM system takes those abstract numbers and grounds them into immediate, practical, daily navigation.
Right, because 8 a.m. actually feels like something.
Yes. For a human being, AM becomes synonymous with daylight, waking up, the smell of coffee, starting the day. PM becomes synonymous with the afternoon, the evening, dusk, winding down.
So it maps the numbers directly onto the physical experience of the sun rising and setting.
It takes a cold mathematical concept and turns it into a recognizable human rhythm.
That is so interesting. But, knowing the numbers on a clock doesn't mean much if you can't express what you're actually doing when the hands hit 8 a.m.
Very true.
That's where the linguistic engine kicks in. Now that the timeline of the day is established in the lesson, the source material moves to how language attaches actions to those specific times using specific grammar.
Yes, the grammar is where that timeline actually comes to life. It's how we assert our existence within that time.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The core grammar focus of this entire lesson is the simple present tense, specifically used for routines.
The foundation of everything we do.
Yeah. The key vocabulary structures are incredibly direct. I wake up at, I eat, I go to work, or I go to school. And to glue it all together, the lesson introduces 3 specific frequency markers: every day, always, and usually.
Those frequency markers are absolutely vital. They signal to the listener that the action being described isn't just a random one-time event, right? It is a pattern.
It's who you are.
Exactly. It is a defining characteristic of the speaker's life. When you say, I always eat breakfast at 8 a.m., you are telling someone about your fundamental nature.
But when you read through the source material, these phrases start to feel incredibly repetitive, almost hypnotic.
Oh, for sure.
It's like a metronome ticking in the background of the textbook. Tick-tock, I wake up. Tick-tock, I eat. Tick-tock, I go. It strips all the flowery prose, all the emotion out of the language, and leaves you with this driving, percussive beat of daily existence.
And that percussive beat is exactly why it's taught this way. The simple present tense is essentially the engine of habit.
The engine of habit. I like that.
From a neurological standpoint, repetition is the pedagogical core of this lesson. As an adult language learner, you need to master the basic sentence structure, subject, verb, time, until it bypasses your active working memory and becomes pure muscle memory.
You have to automate it so you don't have to actively think about the translation.
Exactly. You have to build that structural automation in your brain before you can even think about adding the complexity of past events or future intentions.
Because if you can't even say what you're doing right now.
Right. If you can't confidently articulate your present reality, what you do every single day in the current moment, you have no foundation for expressing anything else. The simple present anchors the learner in what linguists sometimes call the recurring now. It builds confidence because it's completely predictable.
It is predictable, but grammar on its own, floating in a vacuum, means nothing without context.
It's yours.
And the textbook brings the simple present grammar to life through 2 very contrasting daily schedules. The lesson uses 2 characters, Sara and Tom, to model how this language works in the real world.
And the details of their routines aren't just random, they are surprisingly specific.
They really are. Let's look at Sara first.
Sara's routine is highly detailed, and it paints a very specific sociological picture.
It really does. Look at her schedule. She wakes up at 6:30 a.m., which the text specifically notes is early, and the very first thing she does is exercise for 30 minutes.
Setting a good example right away.
Yeah, and the textbook explicitly has her state that she feels great after doing it. Then at 8 a.m., she starts working from home and eats her breakfast, which consists specifically of toast and coffee.
Now, notice the choice of toast and coffee.
Mhm.
It's culturally neutral.
Oh, right. I didn't think about that.
They aren't having her eat a complex regional dish that might confuse a learner. They're using globally recognized anchor points.
That makes a lot of sense. Then we hit midday, 12 p.m., which is her lunch. And she specifically points out in the text that lunch is her favorite time of day because she loves food.
Very relatable.
Very. In the afternoon at 3 p.m., she drinks tea. At 6 p.m., she cooks dinner. And finally, at 9 p.m., she watches TV. So that's Sara's day. Now let's contrast that with Tom.
Tom's routine is quite a bit different, structurally speaking.
Very different. Tom wakes up at 7 a.m. and immediately takes a shower. He eats breakfast at 7:30 a.m. And then at 8 a.m., he leaves and goes to work.
A very standard morning rush.
Yeah. He has his midday lunch at 12 p.m., finishes work at 5 p.m. and goes home. Then at 10:30 p.m., he goes to bed.
It's a very straightforward, sequential timeline.
It is, but I have to push back slightly on this textbook's approach here. When you read them side by side, the contrast between these two characters feels almost overwhelmingly stark.
How so?
Well, Tom's schedule feels like a very traditional, somewhat rigid commuter routine. Get up, shower, commute, work, come home, sleep. It's the classic industrial era workday. It's almost a caricature of the daily grind.
And Sarah is the opposite.
Exactly. Sarah represents this very modern, flexible work from home routine. She has time to exercise in the morning. She has afternoon tea breaks at 3 p.m. She's cooking dinner at 6. It feels like two completely different, almost stereotyped lifestyles being used to teach the exact same grammar. Why rely on such extreme archetypes?
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Hmm.
that stark contrast, those archetypes you were pointing out, they are highly intentional and entirely necessary.
Really?
Yes, language learning materials have to appeal to an incredibly broad audience. They need relatable hooks. If the lesson only featured Tom's traditional commuter schedule, a learner who works from home, or maybe a stay-at-home parent, might feel entirely disconnected from the vocabulary.
Oh, I see. They wouldn't see their own reality reflected in the textbook.
Exactly.
But by making them so distinct, aren't they just reinforcing stereotypes?
At the A1 beginner level, stereotyping, or more accurately, using broad, recognizable cultural archetypes, is actually a required tool for comprehension. You just don't have the vocabulary yet to explain nuance.
That's a fair point. You can't explain a hybrid work schedule if you barely know the word for work.
Right. By providing both the commuter and the remote worker, the lesson is offering mirrors to the students. Whether you are like Tom, rushing out the door at 8 a.m., or you are like Sarah, logging onto your laptop at the kitchen table with toast and coffee, you can find a reflection of your own life in these examples.
It proves that the language actually applies to you.
Exactly. It proves to the learner that this language, this simple present tense, is flexible enough to describe completely different realities.
Okay, so as a learner, you've observed these routines, you've seen the vocabulary and the grammar in action, and you've ideally found a character whose schedule somewhat matches your own.
Right. You've taken the theory in.
But learning a language isn't just about passively reading a textbook. The deep dive shifts here because the source material dramatically pivots from passive observation to demanding active participation from the learner.
And this is the critical threshold in any language journey. It is where the theoretical grammar must become practical application.
The textbook explicitly prompts the learners to start repeating phrases out loud. I wake up at o'clock. I eat breakfast at ... I go to school or work at ...
They have to actually make the sounds.
Yeah, and it doesn't stop at just parroting the book. It gives a specific practice tip. It says, write your own daily schedule in English. It provides an example format for you. 7 a.m., wake up. 7:30 a.m., breakfast.
It's forcing the transition from consuming the language to producing it. Writing it down engages a completely different part of the brain than simply reading it.
Yes, and then the book instructs the learner to share this written schedule with a friend. But the final piece of advice in this lesson is the most striking to me.
Ooh, which part?
It says, practice at home, practice with a friend, or practice in front of a mirror. So what does this all mean? Writing it down makes total sense for memory. Practicing with a friend makes sense for conversational skills. But why is speaking to a mirror specifically recommended as a vital step in this foundational text?
This raises an important question about the profound difference between passive and active learning, particularly when we're dealing with adult learners.
Okay, break that down for me.
When you read or listen to a new language, you are passively decoding information. Your brain is working, but it feels comfortable. However, actually speaking a new language is a deeply physical act. It is biomechanical.
Biomechanical.
Yes, you have to move your jaw, your tongue, your lips in entirely new ways to produce foreign phonetic sounds.
Oh, right. It's almost like a physical workout for your face. Like, have you ever tried to roll your R's or make a guttural sound in a new language? You can literally feel your jaw physically resisting the new shapes.
Exactly. You are fighting against decades of phonotactic muscle memory built from your native tongue.
That is wild to think about.
Furthermore, we have to look at the neuroscience here. Speaking engages Broca's area in the frontal lobe of the brain, which is responsible for speech production and articulation. You have to train that area.
So it's literally a physical and neurological workout.
It is. But beyond the physical and neurological, there is a massive psychological barrier. For many adult learners, speaking out loud for the first time is terrifying. There's a deep vulnerability in sounding foolish, in reverting to the linguistic capability of a toddler.
Oh, for sure. No one wants to sound like a baby.
In linguistics, this anxiety is known as the affective filter. When the affective filter is high, like when you are stressed or embarrassed, your brain literally blocks language acquisition.
So if you are practicing with a friend, even a supportive one, that affective filter might be triggered because you feel like you are performing and you are terrified of making a mistake.
Precisely. Synthesizing the pedagogy here, vocalizing in front of a mirror is an incredibly strategic hack.
A hack? How so?
It forces the learner to confront the physical mechanics of speaking engaging Broca's area, forcing the jaw and tongue to do the work. But it entirely removes the pressure of an external audience, which lowers that affective filter.
Oh, because it's just you in the room. No one is judging you.
Exactly. It solidifies those cognitive pathways in a low-stakes environment. You watch your own mouth form the words, you hear your own voice produce the sounds in real space, and you begin to wire that new language into your physical muscle memory. The mirror acts as a safe, yet intensely active testing ground. It is just you and the language.
It bridges the gap between the silent thought in your head and the physical sound in the real world. That is such a powerful image. It really drives home the point that you have to lay the concrete yourself. You can't just watch someone else build the house and expect to live in it.
Exactly. And that brings us full circle to why this A1 textbook is such a profound document. It is literally an instruction manual for rebuilding your reality from scratch.
Which perfectly wraps up our journey today. We started at the absolute ground level with basic numbers, exploring how reducing the 24-hour clock down to 12 numbers minimizes cognitive load for a struggling adult brain.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. We explored the simple present tense as this relentless rhythmic engine of habit, the metronome of our daily lives. We analyzed the contrasting routines of Sara and Tom, looking at how the modern remote worker and the traditional commuter serve as necessary sociological mirrors for the learner.
The building blocks of daily existence.
Yeah, and finally, we looked at the vital importance of active practice, exploring how taking the brave step of speaking to a mirror lowers the affective filter while forging those new physical and cognitive pathways.
It's a humbling reminder for you, the listener. No matter how complex your native vocabulary has become over the years, no matter how many nuances, abstract concepts, or sophisticated arguments you can weave into a daily conversation, your life is still fundamentally built on these exact same basic linguistic building blocks.
It's so true.
When you strip away all the posturing and all the complexity, our days are still anchored by the simple numbers on a clock and the recurring routines of the simple present.
And that leads to a fascinating thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. If you had to strip away all the nuance of your life right now, if you had to describe your entire day to someone using only the simple present tense and basic clock times.
No caveats allowed.
Right. No complex emotions, no justifications for why you were late, no what ifs, no should haves, just the concrete foundation of your actions. How would it change your perception of your own life's rhythm? Are we all, underneath it all, just a sequence of I wake up, I eat, I go? Until next time, keep digging into the foundations of the things you take for granted.